بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا وعظيمنا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع نفوسنا أبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين وأصحابه الغر الميامين. الحمد لله الذي جعلنا من المتمسكين بولاية سيدي ومولاي علي بن أبي طالب. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. أما بعد، يقول الله في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. كل نفس ذائقة الموت. When a Muslim dies, the question that obviously arises is a question concerning how do you bury that Muslim? How does one go about with the burial rites of the Muslim male or female in their community? No doubt the religion of Islam places a major emphasis on maintaining the sanctity and the honor and the dignity of the body of all human beings, but especially members of the Muslim community, where there is a responsibility upon a member of the community to ensure that if there is a body that needs burying, that they undertake this task. Each and every religion in the world today has their own rites, their own rituals when it comes to burying the dead. And yes, while we're slowly moving from Dar al-Bala to Dar al-Jaza, from the world of trial to the world of reward in these next few nights, and focusing on the soul, we cannot forget about ensuring that we look after the body that is now died. The body that is now dead cannot be forgotten because a person simply wants to focus on the journey of the soul. Yes, the soul does taste some of the anguish of death, but at the same time, Islamic law sought to stress that each and every one of us has to make sure that we are there to take a responsibility for our fellow Muslim brother or sister who has died. A person cannot simply know about a death that has happened in the community without recognizing the obligation upon them, known in Arabic as wajib kifa'i, that at least one or more have to have undertaken the responsibility of ensuring that that body, for example, is washed, or that body is shrouded, or that body is eventually buried. And you find therefore that every school within the religion of Islam has their own perspective on how exactly the Muslim body should be treated upon death. We know that in the Muslim world today there are a number of legal schools. We are known as the Ja'fari school. There are others who are known as the Hanafi school, named after Nu'man bin Thabit, Abu Hanifa. Others who are known as the Maliki school, named after Malik bin Anas. Others which are known as the Shafi'i school, known as Muhammad bin Idris al-Shafi'i, his school, the Shafi'i school, as well as the Hanbali school, the school of Ahmad bin Hanbal. That's not to forget other schools who have their own understandings of the rites and rituals of burial. The Ismailis, the Zaydis within the Shia, for example, the Ibadis as well. All of these different schools of law seek to find an understanding of how to look after that body when it's died. That a Muslim in their understanding of death and the hereafter cannot forget the importance of looking after the body, of ensuring that body dies and is dignified in that period and the process of death. And this, without a doubt, has become even more important with the rise of the coronavirus. If you ask many Muslims, we were used to that when we'd hear a piece of news of someone passing away, we were always used to a particular burial committee in our mosques. In our mosques, there would be a burial committee who would be looking after that dead body that has now got into their hands. They will look after the shrouding, they'll look after the washing, and they'll look after the burial process. Well, how about now with the coronavirus? A number of questions have arisen. And indeed, these questions have brought about a lot of discussions in the Muslim community, because the Muslim community used to pride itself that it was a community that would always ensure that it looked after the dead body, a community that would always ensure that it would protect the rights of the family of the deceased. And now we are told that we have to wear certain equipment. We are told even that ghusl may not necessarily be necessary when there is a danger involved, that we move towards the world of tayammum, and that tayammum may not even be necessary, and that there may be a situation where a Muslim dies without having gone through what many before them have gone through. Does this therefore have an effect on them in the hereafter? And what do our mosques do about this? Because there is an emotional connection with the dead. A person who's just lost their father and has been to many funerals, for example, would be somebody who'll turn around and say that, wait, everybody else I heard about their fathers having a ghusl, having a kafan, having, for example, the different waters which were used to wash him, having the burial take place with the ghusl being the basis of it, and now you're telling me that my father will not go through all of this? So some people, without a doubt, have had an emotional reaction to this, in the sense that some of these people, what have they said? They've said very clearly that why is this happening, and what are the opinions of our maraja on this? And that's why you find that many of the followers of the maraja in the world today, especially the followers of Ayatollah Sistani, may Allah lengthen his life, straight away began to ask that with coronavirus, how do the laws of the burial of the dead change? How do we adapt the laws of the burial of the dead to the context that we're in? And how much does one consult the health authorities? Because on the one hand, in the legal manuals, I see, for example, Kitab al-Salah, or Kitab al-Tahara, or Kitab al-Janaiz, these chapters on prayer or on purity or on death, all have a section which discuss the burial process. But I also see the World Health Authorities and organizations, as well as local government, giving their opinions about what is to happen with a body with corona. So therefore, how do we approach this now? Because the world has changed in more ways than one. Not only economically, not only spiritually, but also legally now, with the dead body of a Muslim male or a Muslim female. How do the laws then evolve? Or what are the laws in such an emergency situation? Let's seek to dissect this topic in depth tonight, and I'd like to do this in the following stages. Which famous Shi'i scholar was the one who highlighted to us that make sure the person you're burying has actually died, and you don't want the mistake of them being alive while they're under the ground? Number two, which animal taught us how to bury a human being, and how did that humble those at the time, at the beginning of creation? Number three, what exactly is the stage-by-stage process in which a Muslim buries another Muslim? And how do we understand the wisdom and the meaning behind this process? Number four, with COVID-19, say I have personal protective equipment. Must I, and is it obligatory upon me, to then wash the body, or do I move on to tayammum? And what are the different conditions that apply? Number five, is anyone allowed to exhume a body or to open a grave? And what are the conditions related to this? Number six, does a person, for example, wash the body of a miscarried fetus in the womb of the mother? And, for example, when does the Salat al-Mayyit, or the prayer for the deceased, begin? What age does it begin from? Number seven, which famous grand scholar in his will highlighted that when he dies and when you're about to bury him, make sure that the following are included with him in his grave. And are these allowed to be included? And what is the basis of what he said? And finally, which great personalities can we empathize with in this day and age who may not have had many attend their funerals, may not have had many attend their burials, and may not even have had the fastest of processes when it came to burial? Let's examine this and dissect the topic in complete depth. Imagine you bury someone and place them under the ground, 6 feet under, only for you to realize that they're not actually dead. That probably would be one of the worst moments that you could ever face in your life. What we would probably call a feshla in our community, and an absolute embarrassment. And I don't think that the person who would be under the ground would be necessarily somebody who would be too happy with you. But when it happened to one of the greatest scholars in Shia history, then no doubt you found that this scholar made a vow that if he came out from under the ground, he would write a particular text. Which scholar? Of the greatest scholars that we had in Shia history, born in the 5th century, around the year 468 after Hijrah, and died in the year 548 after Hijrah, was the famous scholar by the name of Al-Fadl bin Hassan al-Tabarsi. Yes, Al-Hassan al-Tabarsi, without a doubt, was one of our greatest scholars. You always will hear his name mentioned in relation to many of the greatest texts that we have. You found that this scholar, born in Mashhad, was a scholar who had left a great legacy in his community. Al-Tabarsi, until today, many people read his texts. He had had a heart attack, and the people around him had thought that he had passed away. So when they thought that he had passed away, they saw that there were no signs of him communicating back with them. Of course, maybe the medical equipment at that time was not necessarily as sophisticated as the medical equipment that we have now. So what did they end up doing? They actually ended up burying him. Now, you know that within Shia law, when a person, for example, makes the hole in the ground for the person to be taken 6 feet under, for the deceased to be taken under the ground, they also make a small, let's say, hole or room on the side. There may be some air which they're able to breathe from that small area. That area is not mustahab, but some people make that small room on the side. Therefore, Tabarsi, when he was buried, you found that when he was buried, everybody had assumed that he had died. Everybody had assumed that he had passed away. And he had been there under the ground. Imagine all of a sudden when he woke up, he's looking around and thinking, hold on a minute, what's going on over here? Where is everybody? And then he realized that they had buried him and he hadn't even died. When this was realized by him, you can imagine what was going through his head. But at that moment, he did something. He said, I make a vow, Ya Allah, that if I find a way out of this grave which they've buried me within, then I'm going to write a tafsir of the Holy Quran. Now he's thinking this is the most precarious situation anyone can ever find themselves in. Buried under the ground. Definitely no one's going to be walking around the graveyard unless you're someone who had a particular job, stealing the shrouds. Because in those days, there used to be some people who used to hang around the graveyards. They'd wait until someone's got buried. The moment they've got buried, then what would they do? They'd come when nobody's looking and they'd steal their kafan and then they'd go and sell their kafan in the market. So therefore, when Tabarsi had turned around in his grave and said that, Ya Allah, I promise that I will write a tafsir of the Holy Quran. If you find a way for me, O Allah, that I am able to get out of this grave, then that tafsir will definitely be written. So what took place? That person who was walking around, he's thinking, you know what? Who's been buried today? And he saw that they had just left the grave of the great scholar. So he came to the grave, started digging it. All of a sudden, he saw a hand pulling him. Now you imagine that you at that moment see a hand come out from the grave. You're thinking what's going on, gets frightened. He says, no, wait. And you know that these people who would steal the shrouds, they would be people from the local community. So you would find that he would know Shaykh al-Tabarsi. He would know his voice. So straight away he told him that, look, I am the scholar Tabarsi. He heard his voice. And when he heard his voice, he straight away thought to himself that, hold on, that is his voice. It's him. He said, well, how are you talking? You're buried under the ground. He said to him, because they thought that I had died. But on the contrary, I had had that heart attack, but I managed to regain consciousness. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the giver of life, and He causes death. They thought that he had died. So he said, oh, please let me come out of this grave. The person, of course, looked at him and said, well, hold on. I come here to steal the shrouds, and people find out that I'm in trouble. So if I saved you, people are going to be asking what's happening. He said, listen, don't worry about it. I'll let you have my shroud. Just get me back, I beg you. So he took him, he placed him on his back, and he went back towards the community. Of course, everyone was in shock. Everyone was thinking, hold on a minute, what's happened? On the first level, that person who steals the shrouds, admitted and said, listen, I repent. I'll never be stealing any more shrouds. That moment taught me a lesson that when I saw a hand coming out of the grave and I heard a voice, that's when I knew, you know what, enough is enough. I'm not going through this ever again. Al-Tabarsi ended up writing the famous tafsir of the Holy Quran known as Majma' al-Bayan. Majma' al-Bayan, alongside the Tibyan, alongside the tafsir of Ali bin Ibrahim and Furat al-Kufi, these are classic books of tafsir, of exegesis, interpretation of the verses of the Holy Quran. Of course, he wrote two other books which were also forms of tafsir. You had Jami' al-Jawami' and al-Wafi, but the most famous one until today is which one? The most famous one until today is Majma' al-Bayan. So therefore you found that on the first level, when we Muslims want to bury someone, first make sure that that person has died. Then the moment you know they've died, on which basis did humanity realize that they bury that body under the ground? From the story of Habil and Qabil. That story of Abel and Cain, which is mentioned within the Bible, is also mentioned within the Holy Quran. Because you can imagine that all of us have seen a Salat al-Mayyit, all of us have seen a Janazah, all of us have seen all of these different funerals. But what happens if you saw the first ever death in humanity? What then happens? How would you know necessarily what to do at that moment? So you had these two brothers, Qabil and Habil. They weren't people who had lived with millions of others and had seen different texts revealed. These were two brothers who were living with their father, and you found that these two brothers, one of them had an envy to the other. Qabil could not take the fact that Habil was appointed by God to represent Nabi Adam alayhi salam, to be the successor of Nabi Adam. So when Qabil wanted that position, he told his brother, he said to him and highlighted just what envy can do to you. Because no doubt that envy devours faith like fire devours wood. The first lesson we ever learnt in the history of humanity about burying the dead came from Qabil and Habil. That Qabil said to Habil, قَالَ لَأَقْتُلَنَّكَ, he said, I will kill you. And Habil replied back to his brother, highlighting the softness of the heart of Habil and the fact that Habil did not want to resort to killing as the progress for humanity. He said to him, لَإِنْ بَسَطْتَ إِلَيَّ يَدَكَ لِتَقْتُلَنِي مَا أَنَا بِبَاسِطٍ يَدِي إِلَيْكَ لِيَقْتُلَكَ. If you put forward your hand to strike me, I will not put forward my hand to strike you. Why? إِنِّي أَخَافُ اللَّهَ رَبَّ الْعَالَمِينَ. Not because I'm scared of you. What do you think I am? I'm scared of you? I'm not scared of you. But I fear a day where I have to answer to my Lord. When my prophet has said to me that I am his successor, then that appointment is an appointment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm not the one who has appointed myself. And further than that, you're my brother. And I wouldn't expect you to be someone who shows this type of hate towards me. Eventually, Qabil killed Habil. When Qabil killed Habil, Qabil did not know what to do. It's not like us today. We have all of the chapters, all of the hadiths, all the traditions. At that time, they didn't know what to do. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how did He teach him what to do? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent a crow. And Qabil had just killed his brother. He's baffled. What do I do? My brother's body is there. And he looked around and he saw this crow. When he saw the crow burying another crow. And in that moment, he said, woe be unto me. That how arrogant am I that I've killed not only my brother, I've killed a fellow human being, but also I didn't even know what to do with the body. As in, if that body was just there lying on the ground, what exactly do I do? When he saw the crow burying the other crow, he realized that that was the method to be undertaken. That you take that body and you bury it in the ground low enough so that two things become principles. Number one, the animals cannot come and eat that body. And number two, there is no smell that comes from that body. Basic principles when it comes to burying the dead in Islam is that normally we hear the phrase 6 feet under. Yes, 5-6 feet is the average height of the human being. That's how low you go down. Enough. Someone might argue, okay, what if it's a bit higher? Even if it's just a bit higher than that, but make sure that it's enough that no animal can go into the ground and that the smell of the deceased body in no way affects the people around. And that's why the intricacies within the religion of Islam, when it came to burying the dead, can be found from the traditions of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and his family, all the way until the Imams of our time. You'll find that each and every one of them came with an example, provided us with an example as to how is it that we bury the dead body. It's sad that in the Muslim community today, there are many who have never attended a class to understand the way burial takes place. If you sit with many of the Muslim community, and you ask them, they might say to you, okay, ghusl, kafan, dafan. But you ask them, tell me further, tell me the intricacies. Many assume that they'll never have to take up a position where they have to be responsible, for example, of the dead, or for example, of looking after the deceased. But the reality is that we could find ourselves in a situation where one day we have to emigrate and we have to establish a place for us where we bury the dead of our community. As I mentioned, it's a wajib kifai. And alhamdulillah, in our communities, since the 70s, since the 80s, so many members of our communities established places where a person was able to see that their family members were washed and they were shrouded and they were buried. But there is a need for more of us to understand this. What are the stages involved? That if, say, for example, that my parents died, and I need to know what are the stages for burying the dead. As we said, Christianity or Hinduism may, for example, at certain times talk of cremation. Others, like Judaism, may have rituals similar to ours. What are therefore our rituals or our laws when it comes to burying the dead in the religion of Islam? Fundamental in our understanding of death. First and foremost, that dead body, when you receive it, you obviously recognize that you need to wash it at the beginning to clear away any stool that may be there. There may be feces there. There could be vomiting there. There could be blood there. So you, from the outset, will make sure that you try and give that body a wash. A person wears gloves because you know that one of the ghusuls which becomes wajib for us is the ghusl when a person has touched that cold body. If you have touched the warm body, for example, that's just passed away, it is not the same as when a person touches the coldness of that dead body. Ghusl becomes wajib on that person who has touched that cold, deceased body. But if they wear gloves, for example, then at that moment, as long as they know that, for example, they're wearing their clothing and they're wearing those gloves, and that if there is no splashing of that water, for example, that touching that is there, then that ghusl does not become wajib on them. So a person wears gloves, and there may be a few people who are undertaking that ghusl. When they're undertaking that washing of that dead body, we find that these few people who are there, the one who is going to begin with the pouring of the water has to be the one who makes the niyyah. They make the intention that they're beginning the stages of the washing of the deceased. At the beginning, when that person has died, of course you put them up, their feet face Qibla, so that when they get up, they face Qibla straight away. You bring them towards the ghusl room. When you bring them, those people who are in charge, the one who's in charge of pouring the water will make his intention. And when they make their intention, of course, men wash the bodies of men, and the female washes the body of the female. A husband can wash his wife's body, and the wife can wash her husband's body. Of course, the only school that does not allow the husband to wash the wife's body is the Hanafi school of law. They're the ones who stipulate that the husband cannot wash the wife's body, but the wife can wash the husband's body. Why? Because they say the husband, when, for example, that wife has died, the husband, now the marital bonds are broken. So the husband cannot touch his wife. But the wife can wash the husband's body because she's still in her iddah of being a widow. We know that the iddah period for a widow is 4 months and 10 days. So that lady is not going anywhere. She's going to make sure she makes full use of that. Otherwise, male will wash male, female washes female. And you find, therefore, of course, if it's a young child, then these laws will change. Someone, for example, under the age of 3, it will not apply. But generally, of course, in the laws of Mahramiyah, the male will wash the male and the female will wash the female. When, for example, this group of males are there and they're washing that body, the person who's washing made their intention, and when they made their intention, they will come with the washing. They will use 3 different types of waters or the liquids. They'll have that water which is mixed with sidr, yes, the berry leaves. And they'll have that water which is mixed with the kafur. And they'll have that water which is pure water. When I say mixed, we don't want it to reach a stage where we cannot tell that this is water anymore. There is a slight mixing. So enough of that sidr or enough of that camphor is there, and they bring it together. And when they bring it together, they begin with the washing. Of course, the private parts have to be covered by a piece of cloth. That private part cannot be exposed. And everything that happens within the washing of the dead body in Islam, those who are washing cannot ever say anything outside about what they saw. Because there is a sanctity to that dead body. Yes, the bodies die and decay. And the soul continues to go on its journey. But that doesn't mean that a person disrespects that dead body. That dead body is to be respected with honor. That dead body is not to be a body which is ripped up or destroyed. Or even when you come to certain discussions about post-mortems, Islam says go and ask for other bodies if they are available before a person takes your body that is with you. Ask for other bodies if they want to find, for example, new scientific material. There are other bodies that they can use. The whole idea of ripping up a body for scientific knowledge, while Islam does not dismiss this outright, says that there has to be a particular sanctity to the body of the human being. So therefore, when these people are washing, of course, in some cases, when you're washing, you'll find then maybe some nails will come off or some hairs. You bring them all together with the body. You don't throw these away. Or you'll find, for example, that someone who's had a head injury, their body may be bleeding profusely. You get a plastic bag, for example, and you cover the head of that person to ensure that this blood, for example, is that blood which a person is able to control. Because while that bleeding is there, you may even have to put a plaster on that bleeding. And a person therefore continues. They make sure that what have they done? They make sure that they have washed this body from every direction, and they're delicate with that body. Islam wanted us to show respect to that body. A person doesn't just move it around from the right side to the left side, from the left side to the right side without care. No, even when they want to let the fingers out or they want to let the arms out, the feet out, everything is done with care. Everything is done with respect. Even the washing that is done softly, a person recognizes that when someone's died, there is still a feeling there, and there is still an attachment there with the soul. So a person is delicate with what they're doing. So once we've done all of this, we've made sure that we've washed every single section. We've made sure that even the areas of the private parts, all of them have been washed. Then we will take off those cloths. We'll keep on changing those cloths. And we will make sure that at the same time, we have brought about that kafur. When we bring that kafur, we place it where? We place it on the 7 places of sujood. Yes. There are 7 places where it's obligatory for us, the sujood, on the forehead. Of course, when it comes to our hands, the palms, we have our knees and we have our toes. All of these areas for sujood are obligatory. We'll place it on each of those areas. And then we'll make sure that when that is done, that kafan is placed. That kafan which is placed, those cloths have to be placed, 3 different cloths. Of course, some might talk about more to ensure that a full covering is taken place. But normally, the belly button, the navel area, and from the neck down, and the covering of the whole shirt, the longer shirt on the body, that kafan, therefore, is to be placed. That kafan is to be placed. And of course, you find that this ghusl and kafan applies even to that 4-month-old baby that may have been miscarried. Salat al-Mayyit, on the other hand, will apply to the child when they're above the age of 6. But before that, the ghusl is to be given if it can be done, even to the baby. So what you have therefore is that once the ghusl has been done, and once the kafan has been done, so we've had the ghusl done, and we've had the kafan done. Likewise, if someone says, okay, what if I never had water? Then tayammum is to be done. Yes. And tayammum, how is it to be done? It's to be done that when the person, for example, comes, in the same way that there are certain areas where tayammum takes place, because we know that the earth has been made a place of prostration and purity for us. As the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, and his family said, قال, what did he say? إِنَّمَا جُعِلَتْ لِيَ الْأَرْض مَسْجِدًا وَطَهُورًا. The earth has been made a place of prostration for me. Hence we pray on a turba, or on the moor, on the sajdagar, and the earth has been made a place of purity for me. Purity in which way? That's when we perform tayammum. In the same way that we perform tayammum, and we come to the forehead, bring our hands down, go to wiping the hands. Likewise, a person does that on that dead body if they could not do ghusl. You'll make sure that you touch the areas of the forehead, the areas of the right and the left hand. That is to be done for them as well. So when somebody now has completed what? They've completed the ghusl, they've completed the kafan. Where do they go now? They go towards the burial. When we go towards the burial, okay, the defin, we go towards that burial, and we have someone who will lead the salah. Salat al-Mayyit. Somebody will come and lead it. One of the Mawlanas or one of the scholars of the community, when they come towards leading. For us, with this salah, there are a few points which are to be noted. What are they? First and foremost, within the salah, a person does not need to do wudu for them to take part in Salat al-Mayyit. Secondly, you can even wear shoes when taking part in Salat al-Mayyit, in the janazah of the Mayyit, in that prayer. Thirdly, you find that there isn't a ruku' and there isn't a sujood. There's no bowing and there's no prostration within the salah for the dead. Fourthly, there are certain acts that the Mawlana will perform or that he'll recite. Of course, in front of him will be the person who has died. He'll stand in the middle behind that person. And if it's a lady, he'll stand by, for example, behind the chest area of the lady. And you'll find that he will come. And this salah, at the beginning, like Salat al-Eid, we'll hear as-salat, 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 3 times, Salat al-Mayyit. And then he'll come to a distance where, if the wind blew for example, the saya or the abaya that he's wearing, it would touch that particular casket or that coffin, let's say, in certain situations, and that's where he will stand, and then he will do the salah. When he performs the salah, within Shi'i law, we have 5 takbirat for the salah. Other schools in Islam, you'll see that they have 4 takbirat for the salah. We have 5. So therefore we say Allahu Akbar 5 times, the Mawlana will lead. Some of what he says is wajib. Some of what is said is mustahab. So the Mawlana will come and stand. For example, what is wajib? Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. Wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Allahu Akbar. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahu Akbar. Then he'll move on to Allahumma aghfir lil mu'minina wal mu'minat wal muslimina wal muslimat. Allahu Akbar. Allahumma aghfir li hadha al mayyit. That person who is buried there, he'll mention their name, or if he doesn't know their name, he'll say Allahumma aghfir li hadha al mayyit. And then Allahu Akbar, and the salah is complete. That is the wajib portion of what? Of the salat al-mayyit. Otherwise, some Mawlanas will recite more mustahabbat. There's no problem there. From there, we'll go towards burying that person. We'll take them under the ground. Therefore, that was seen as being the burial process within the Muslim graveyard. Many have purchased areas within non-Muslim graveyards, but are areas for the Muslim community. That was seen as the method. But now COVID-19 brought about a change. And we know that sometimes there are emergency situations where Islamic law makes an exception. But above all else is what? Above all else is to provide protection for the life of the human being. For example, we know that eating pork in Islam is completely prohibited. It's haram for a person to eat pork. Does not matter, small amount of pork, small amount of bacon. It is completely forbidden for a Muslim to eat. Same way flesh of the swine was spoken of in the faiths before Islam. Likewise in Islam, you find that a Muslim, it is prohibited for them to eat pork. Say this Muslim is in an area where there is absolutely nothing that you can eat. There's nothing. There's not even shrubs on the ground. Barren piece of land. No one's going to pick up rocks and eat them. So say, for example, you are in that moment and you're absolutely starving. You're moments away from dying. And the only thing in front of you, for example, is that you can only eat that pork. Is a person allowed? The Quran even mentions that although eating the flesh of the swine is that which is prohibited, except in a situation where you are compelled. Yes. That situation where you're compelled, only then may a person, for example, eat that which normally is prohibited. What's happening here? A law which is established in relation to our dietary habits, something which we in the community are used to, all of a sudden now we can't. Why? Because of the emergency situation, we have to give it a different application. Sometimes even, there is a clash between 2 areas of law. Let's say, for example, my neighbor in their swimming pool, they have a swimming pool in their garden, and I see their child is drowning in the pool. I'm in my garden, and I see their child drowning, and their child is going to die. I face a clash of legal principles here. On the one hand, I'm not allowed to enter somebody else's property without their permission. You can go to the laws of ghasbi and other laws. On the other hand, Islam tells me that I have to look after and save the life of the human being. What takes precedence here? Yes? In the laws of al-muhim wal-aham, you'll find that the life of the human being, the safety of the human being, all takes precedence. Why do we say this? Because when it's come to the issue of the coronavirus and COVID-19, we have this situation that's arisen, where now, if a person wants to do ghusl like you would normally do in washing the body of the deceased, we have the danger of the virus affecting us and us affecting others in our households and in the community. As then we look around us and we find that there are doctors in hospitals and those in the NHS who are doing amazing work, But you find that they'll tell you blatantly that, listen, I have had it and I've been working here. And there are others who definitely have been affected by the coronavirus. So then you had what's known as personal protection. The equipment which is personal protective equipment which a person has to wear. So the guidelines then emerge for us. What do we do? Say someone in our community now has died. Does ghusl become obligatory on them? In normal cases, yes. But in this case, we have to see, is there PPE in the center? Is the room a room which is disinfected? Is the area an area where the ventilation is enough for us to say that we are safeguarding those who are performing the ghusl? Yes? In this moment, if Ayatollah Sistani, may Allah lengthen his life, gives us a ruling about those who have died, Ayatollah Sistani gives us a ruling, then we have to look at our particular area. Yes? Our tashkhis on this issue is that we have to look at the area where we're living. What is the guidelines that are being given? And how do we bring about a discussion between those guidelines and what our marja has said to us in relation to looking after the dead? Because we know that Islamically, death is a moment where a Muslim has to make sure they honor that dead body. So I don't want to be in a situation where I come on the day of judgment, my Lord looks towards me, and my Lord says to me that why did you not give ghusl when I had made it obligatory upon you? Ayatollah Sistani tells us and makes it very clear, if you have that personal protective equipment and the people, their life is not in danger who are performing it, you have all of the means necessary, then ghusl is to be performed. However, if you see that the situation you're in is a difficult, dangerous situation, where, for example, you may have all the equipment that covers you, let's say from your belly button up, and all the necessary visors and all the necessary masks, but still you recognize that there may be a difficulty, then you move from ghusl to tayammum. Don't worry and be anxious that, you know what, Ya Allah, that's my mother, I want to make sure she's given what everyone else's mother received. Your own mother would probably turn around to you and say, son, safeguard your household, safeguard your life, safeguard yourself. Ayatollah Sistani, therefore, provided us with these guidelines. So therefore, some mosques in the UK, they have the personal protective equipment, and they've gone ahead with telling the people that we will perform the ghusl, and they've performed ghusl graciously. And they've done a wonderful job. Others, it's at their discretion. If they feel that there is a danger in the area they're in, a danger that some of the people there participating don't have the training, a danger that they may not have enough people, then they can move from ghusl towards tayammum. Someone says, okay, if I move from ghusl towards tayammum, let's say I do this, it's no problem. But how do we do tayammum on this body that has been affected by the coronavirus? Because one school said that, look, a dead body is not going to infect you with the coronavirus. We haven't reached a conclusion on this. Medicine is still finding out. So now if I move on to tayammum, there is no problem if your Islamic center moves on to tayammum, if they feel that even with the PPE, there are still dangers involved, risks involved. There is a tashkhis that is to be done on this area. A marja may give you a fatwa, for example, and you may have your own tashkhis on a particular area where you discuss this area with your community. You've got, for example, some hospitals who say that body doesn't come out of that body bag. So therefore, what would you do? Exactly what I said earlier with tayammum. If say you had a normal case, not one with coronavirus, what did we say? You said the same way the areas you do tayammum on, for example, those areas which you do it on, you will do the same on the top of that body bag. So you've got the body bag. On top of that body bag, you will make sure that the person's hands and their forehead, for example, that area, all of it from the top of the body bag is done. Someone says, what about these other areas where I want to splash the water and so on? No, because this is an emergency situation and there are exceptions. And let me make it clear. If we find dangers with ghusl and difficulties with tayammum, Ayatollah Sistani even reaches a stage where the only thing to be done at the end is the salah of the mayyit. That's it. Someone will say, but will Allah punish me? Why would Allah punish you? Don't be too pedantic with Islamic law. The religion of Islam has its norms, but it has its exceptions. And this is an exception that people's lives may be in danger. They may go home. They may infect others. Therefore, when I follow my marja', what's my marja' telling me? He's telling me that you are the one who knows about this religion, or I. You have studied, or I. I'm the one who's given you the general ruling. Do tashkhis of the ruling to your particular center, to your particular environment, and then come with a conclusion as to what should be done. When he says this, therefore, to us, those were the guidelines to be given to us today. Therefore, with our local centers, alhamdulillah, may Allah bless all of our centers in the UK and around the world for their diligence, for their hard work, and for their sensitivity in these times. These are not easy times when it comes to burial of the dead. And that's why normally you'll find that our janazah, salat al-mayyit, so many people will be there. When it's restricted to 5 or 6, it's for our safety. I wish there could be thousands there, but it's for our safety. Someone asks that is there any possibility in Islamic law that someone has died and you're able to, for example, exhume the grave, or you're able to open the grave? In terms of exhuming the grave, for a particular exceptions, you find that the Shia and the Maliki school allow it. In terms of opening the grave, these exceptions can be given by the ruling authorities for a particular reason. I remember there was a group that had come from Kuwait. They had come for ziyarah of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. One of them, their sister, died. When she died, you found that they had to perform the salah and salat al-mayyit and the burial, where they had to perform it in Wadi Salam. Wadi Salam, may Allah bless all of us to visit Wadi Salam, that graveyard in the vicinity of Amir al-Mu'mineen, salawatullah wa salamu alayh, where people talk of the souls which go to Wadi Barhut and Wadi Salam, which we'll come to when discussing the world of Barzakh. You found that this person buried his sister because there was a number of people at the janazah from the group. While they were burying his sister, he had gone down in the grave. When he had left, he realized that his passport had fallen where? In the grave. Went to see Ayatollah al-Khoi. May Allah bless his soul. When he went to see Ayatollah al-Khoi, he said to him, Maulana, I buried the dead like the religion of Islam taught me. We did everything, the ghusl, the kafan, the shrouding, the washing, everything was done. Salat al-mayyit was done. But Maulana, I've just realized that my passport has fallen within the grave. Can an exception be given where I can ask those within the graveyard to go and undertake literally the task of getting that passport? He said, yes, go with them. There's an exception. But please make sure they don't open it up entirely. He says, I went there. And he says, when I went there, I began to realize that as they were opening it, I saw the passport, but I had seen that what I thought would be a kafan on, or a shroud on my sister's body, was no longer there. I did not want to see anymore. I straight away took the passport. They covered the grave. I went back to Ayatollah al-Khoi. I said to him, Maulana, this happened, that my sister only just got buried. I came to you, came to your office, and it was an exception that you allowed me to get my passport, Maulana. But now I realize something. I realized that that kafan was no longer there, Maulana. And we only buried her a few hours back. And he says, Ayatollah al-Khoi put his head on the ground, towards the ground. And then he looked towards me. And he said that sometimes these things happen. He said, Maulana, what do you mean? He said that there is a moment when the angels, that after you've just died, they look towards you and say, oh, you who did not cover herself above the ground, why now be concerned about the cover below the ground? When we look at some of these, like the shrouding, I cover myself as I'm about to enter the grave. Why not cover myself before I get to the grave? When I'm under the grave, now the questioning will begin, and we're going to begin very shortly. Can the dead understand and hear us? And then we'll begin discussing talqeen, and we'll begin discussing the squeezing of the grave in the forthcoming nights. But some truly, if you look at a burial process, look at the burial when it takes place. Ask yourself that this person is going to be me one day. Will I be ready to answer? That covering that they have, did I cover in that way? That purity that they have, was I purified in my lifetime? These are all questions we have to ask ourselves. The reality is that there are many don't, but there are certain things that you can help the dead when you're burying them. For example, make sure that Dua Jawshan al-Kabir is there. Make sure, of course, the Holy Quran, Ayatul Kursi. These all have a beneficial effect, but also try and follow what Ayatollah al-Mar'ash al-Najafi has been guiding us with. As you know, many of you know, 20 minutes every night, 20, 25, 30 minutes. We talk about Ayatollah al-Mar'ash al-Najafi in the evening at the Haidari Islamic Center. And these are available. You can listen to them live. 20 minutes, 30 minutes. This man was a grand scholar in Qom. And he knew that his death was coming. And he wanted to make sure that in his will, he wanted to make sure that it was clear that before he dies, he gives instructions to his son, Sayyid Mahmud, about what is to be done. And what did he say to his son? He said to his son that, "Oh my son, when you undertake the burial rites, firstly, I want you to make sure that you are of those who buries me with my handkerchief that I used to wipe away the tears for Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam." Imagine, he said that I want within my grave the handkerchief that I used. Some of you may have some tissue next to you. Some of you may have always used the handkerchief when Masa'ib al-Hussein alayhi salam were being recited. He said, "My son, when I die, and when we die, we want to make sure that we have everything which shows our identity, that I'm a Husseini in every way possible." He said, that handkerchief that I used, place it in there. Number two, the black cloth that I used to wear in Muharram, when I used to remember Sayyid al-Shuhada, in the majalis of Sayyid al-Shuhada, put that in there as well. Yes? Make use of all of these, my dear brothers and sisters, in your will. To your beloved, tell them that this was a handkerchief I used to use when I used to, for example, recite a marthiyah, or a qasida, or a nawha, or a latmiyah, or a nadbiyah. I used to wipe the sweat which was there in Majalis al-Hussein, in me remembering Sayyid al-Shuhada. So he used to say the handkerchief, you could put a tissue. He used to say my black cloth, and he used to always say, and on Thursdays, sit there and remember the masa'ib of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam by my grave after I've died. Why did he say this? Because in these moments, when some of us have lost our beloved parents or uncles, it hurts us when we don't see many at the janazah. Some have only had 5, 6 according to guidelines, with a Maulana leading the salah. It hurts us that we cannot see our beloved, yes? That our beloved is not around us anymore, and that there aren't many who are there who could read dua in these vital moments, who could recite the Quran in these vital moments. Without a doubt, it's hurtful for us, but there are some greater than us. And they only had a handful when it came to their salat al-mayyit, when it came to their janazah. As you know, for the shaheed, the burial rites are different. The shaheed, ghusl does not have to be done for them. And they are buried with the very clothing that they die with. You find that in Islamic history, there are certain personalities when they died. If you think Corona has led to only a few being in your janazah of your family member, I tell you, there were only a few at the burial of Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam. Only a few like Salman and Abu Dhar, and the likes of Ammar and Miqdad alongside Imam Ali alayhi salam. There weren't many there, and she was the greatest lady to have ever lived and walked on the face of the earth. Likewise, Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam only had a few at his janazah, because the Khawarij had sworn that if they were to see the Amir, then they would make sure that they got his body and burnt it. So who was there in his janazah, which we honor in a couple of weeks' time? Only a handful. But you find that at least there were a handful there for his janazah. One man lay on the plains of Karbala, and there was no one there to bury his holy body. Today we're scampering around for someone to bury the bodies of our beloved ones. I ask you, Sayyid al-Shuhada, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, who was there to bury his body? Who was there to place his body softly under the ground? And that's why when you hear how he was buried, when Imam Zain al-Abidin returned to Karbala, when he returned, Banu Asad were thinking of burying him. They wanted to, but they worried about who would come and see them undertaking that burial. How sad Islamic history is, that 50 years after Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi died, you find that only 50 years after he died, his grandson did not even have anyone to bury his body. Until the Imam came towards Bani Asad, he said to them, why haven't you buried all of these bodies? What was their reply? They said, we wanted to, but we don't know which body belongs to whom. There are some bodies with no arms, and there's some bodies with no heads, and there are certain bodies with arrows all over them. What did the Imam tell them to do? The Imam told them, go and dig 3 different holes in the ground. They went and dug those 3 different holes. They came back to him. They said to him, what do you want us to do? He said, in the first hole, bury Habib ibn Madahir. In the second hole, bury the family members. In the second hole, bury the companions of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. In the third hole, bury the family members of Abu Abdullah. They went, they buried Habib ibn Madahir. That's why in Karbala he has his own grave. They went and buried the rest of Shuhada Karbala. And then they went to bury the rest of the family of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Then all of a sudden the Imam began to walk. He said, now I'm going to bury a body that only I can bury. He began the walk towards the holy body of Abu Abdullah. For the first time he'd see the state of his father's body since shimmer was on him. When he got closer to the body, he saw a finger on the ground. What was it? One of the men wanted the ring of Rasulullah, so he chopped the finger of Abu Abdullah to get that ring. When he got closer, it's mustahab for us to turn the cheek one side when we're burying our beloved. I ask you, where was the head of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam when Imam Zain al-Abidin got to the body of his father? He began to gather the earth of Karbala and began to throw it on himself. He gathered the pieces of the father's body. Then Banu Asad turned around to him. They said to him, oh man, there is a body by the Furat. When we lift one side of the body, the other side falls on the ground. When we lift the left side, the right falls on the ground. He began the walk towards whom? He began the walk and he called out, Assalamu alayka ya Qamar bani Hashim. Assalamu alayka ya Abul Fadl al-Abbas. He went towards the holy body of Abul Fadl and he gathered the pieces of Abul Fadl's body. He went and he gathered all of those pieces, yes? But there were some bodies that he had to bury later on. That's why when they returned to Karbala, he brought the head of his father back to the body. The moment he placed the head back to the body, a karama was given to him by his Lord. He heard a voice from his father's body. What did his father have to say to him? The baby, place the baby on my chest. His neck, place his neck on my neck. Don't you know, my son Ali? Don't you know the heat of that arrow hurts me till now? Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Raise your hands, brothers and sisters. We have Al-Hajj Ijaz Khan. We have Al-Hajj Aslam Hashim. Other brothers and sisters who are in difficult moments. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Amman yujibu al-mudtarra idha da'ahu wa yakshifu as-su'. أمن يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء 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 يا الله 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 يا Allah. On this night, the night where we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the name of the ma'sumin and dua tawassul, when we all call out Allahumma inni as'aluka wa tawajjahu ilayka binabiyyika nabiyyir rahma Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam ya wajihan 'inda Allah اشفع لنا عند Allah. Ya Allah, for all of our beloved, help them in these difficult times. Bring peace and prosperity on the Ummah of Muhammad and Al Muhammad. Safeguard our community both in their lifetime and on their deaths. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with a Surah Al-Fatiha for all of our marhumeen. But before it, wherever you may be, the loudest of your salawat.